Hey guys, hey, it's Bri here coming at you guys with another video. Today we're going to talk about what's your story. You guys have probably, if you watched my other videos, have heard me talk about your story or my story. But today we're going to talk about finding your story and what's your story. So with that said, let's get to talking. So for those of you guys that have watched my previous videos, you know that I used to be a CNA and I used to take care of people on their deathbeds. One of the things that I did was I worked in therapy, and I also worked with a lot of hospice. Hospice is not something that I recommend. I mean, you really have to have a heart. You really have to be able to leave that at work and not take it home with you. Hospice is not an easy job. And it will never ever get easy. Nothing is easy about watching somebody else die. Nothing is easy about losing somebody. It's not easy at all. So most people don't realize is your mind's not there anymore. It's almost like your soul's already left your body. Your mind's just not there, and you're kind of not understanding that for your safety you probably should stay in bed, or for your safety you should have somebody else help you get out of bed. But 9 times out of 10, the patient gets out of bed and they try to walk to the bathroom, or they try to walk outside. They try to find their loved ones. They can't figure out why they're there. Sometimes they don't know. But every once in a while, you get one that does know, but they just want to get out of bed and they don't want to listen. These are the ones that I like to ask them what their story is. To settle them down and get them calm, I like to say, what's your story? Tell me what your story is. A lot of times I will get patients, or I no longer work in healthcare, but I would get patients who were on their deathbed and they would start crying and they would say, my story's horrible. Are you sure you want to hear this? And I'd say, yes, this is your time. Like, tell me what your story is. And so then they would go into their story and they would tell me things like, well, I made a lot of money, but I was never home with my family. Or I chose to take a career and my kids suffered for it. I cheated on my wife, or I cheated on my husband and they left me, and that was my soulmate. I know that I was meant to be with that person. And I think back to that all the time and I think, what's the story I want? When I am old and gray and I'm in a nursing home, which I hope nobody has to go to a nursing home, but you know what, sometimes it happens. But when I'm old and gray and I'm on my deathbed, what's my story? What's the story that I'm going to tell my grandkids? When I'm sitting on the rocking chair in front of my house and I'm watching them play, what's the story that I'm going to tell them? Well, I can tell you that, for one thing, I finally stood up for myself and I moved clear across the country from Wyoming to South Carolina. Just me and my dog. Well, my uncle drove, but you know, he had to go back home eventually to Wisconsin. So technically, in a roundabout way, just me and my dog. You know, I can tell them that. I can say that I started finding a way to help others, that I started living my purpose, that I started working towards living my purpose. And I chose to do it because I knew that deep down, the bottom depths of my heart, I knew that my purpose here on earth was to help others. So today I want you to think, what's your story? Sit down for a minute and think about it. What's your story? What's the story that you want to tell? What's the story that you want to give to your grandkids? What's the story that you want to give to that CNA that's taking care of you when you're old and gray and on your deathbed? What's the story that you want to tell? Is it, I made a crap ton of money and you want to know what? I don't know who my family is. Or is it, I made a crap ton of fun, sorry. Or is it, I made a crap ton of money and I took my kids with me? You know, you can still make a crap ton of money. You totally can. But you can also take your kids with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you take your family with you. You can say, I traveled around the world, or I traveled around the world before I got married, or I went and I was a doctor, or I went back to school. And yes, I was 30 some years old or 40 years old, but I went back to school because I knew that I needed to. Or is it that I picked up everything? I sold whatever I couldn't fit into the back of a U-Haul, and I hooked a U-Haul up to the back of my Toyota 4Runner, and I drove it from Wyoming to South Carolina because I was done living somebody else's dream. What's the story? You know, sit down and just think about it for a couple of minutes. Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing other people's stories. A lot of people have interesting stories. You know, we all have a story. And even if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I don't have a story, well, you do have a story. You just need to find it. You just need to start writing it. You know, you just need to put the pen to the paper and start writing it. If you feel like you don't have a story, it just means that you are the one that needs to start writing it. You are the author of your own story. So start writing it today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait until somebody says, hey, you know, you have 10 days to live, and you're like, oh crap, I'm gonna go jump out of a plane now or something like that. I mean, that's part of my story. That's on my bucket list. It's been on my bucket list for years. But the point is eventually I'm going to get to that part of my bucket list because I choose to write my own story. And that's the other thing, write your own story. I had a patient one time and she was laying there and I asked her, what's your story? And she said, you don't want to hear it. And I said, why not? She goes, because you're about to move to South Carolina. And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, you're choosing yourself. You're choosing to live the life that you want to live. And I said, yes, I am. But what's that got to do with me? And she said, because I didn't choose my life. I didn't write my story. That's what she told me. I felt heartbroken for her in those moments because she told me I didn't write my story. She never wrote her own story. It was written by somebody else. It was written by her husband. It was written by her dad. It was written by her mother. It was even written by her cousin. Her cousin chose for them to move somewhere to go to college. She didn't choose that college. She didn't want to go there for school. But that's what she told me on her deathbed. I didn't write my story. So I asked her, if you could do it all over again, what would you do? She goes, I would write my own story. I would divorce my husband and I would move clear across the country and I would marry the man that I loved. That's the other thing. That's what got me. That very day, you know, I had been in a relationship a few years before that was horrible, but everybody wanted me to stay in this relationship. Nobody understood that he was cheating on me and treating me like crap, but hey, you know, the story was you need to stay in a relationship because that's just what you do. And that's not just what you do, by the way. If somebody is not treating you right, do not stay in that relationship, okay? Do not stay there. But the point is it really got to me because she told me that she was madly in love with another man. And she had a choice to make. Her dad didn't want her to marry this man. Her dad wanted her to stay where she was and marry the man that he chose. A guy that I guess ran a bank or something like that, and he made lots and lots of money, whereas the guy that she loved didn't make that much money. He was like a farmer or something, and he was about to move somewhere like Idaho or something like that. I can't remember where he was moving. And I sat there for a couple minutes and I thought, you didn't choose love. You didn't choose yourself. Instead, she chose to live a different story, a story that was written for her. And that's something I don't want anybody to have. When you're old and gray and you're laying on your deathbed, I want every single person to say, I wrote my story and here's what it is. I wrote my own story. Yes, we make choices. Yes, she chose to listen to her dad instead of standing up for herself and going with the man that she loved. And what resulted in her not marrying the man that she loved, she never had kids because she was never into that relationship. She was never in love with this man that she spent all these years with, that yes, he left her thousands and thousands and hundreds and thousands of dollars at the end of the day, but she was never in love with him. And when he died, she tried to go and find the man that she was in love with, but it was too late. He was already gone. And I sat there and I thought, this is like one of those stories that you read, like The Notebook or something like that, and you're crying your eyes out because you're like, go for the man and all this stuff. And I was sitting there listening so intently to her that I just sat there for a second and it hit me. At that point in my life, I was so afraid to move clear across the country by myself. I was so afraid to do something that was just for me. I was honestly thinking about backing out and staying where I was. And instead, at that very, very moment, I realized that this was my sign. I needed to write my own story. I needed to move clear across the country because it's something I've been wanting to do for so long, and I needed to finally start living my story. Start writing my own story. And by doing so, I've slowly watched as my purpose has started to come into play. And I've slowly watched as, yes, it's been a slow progress, but I had a lot of work to do when I got here. And a lot of that was to heal and let go of the past. But as I'm doing this, I'm watching as everything's starting to come forward, and I'm watching as everything I've been working so hard for is finally coming into reality. And why? Because I choose to write my own story. I choose my story. So what's your story? Sit there for a couple of minutes and think about it tonight. Start writing down options, whatever it is. You know, I've never been a huge fan of pros and cons lists, mainly because they were thrown down my throat, but sometimes they actually do work. Sometimes what's on those pros and cons lists, you're gonna realize that what you are wanting is more on the pros list than what's not what you want is on the cons list. So what you're doing may be on the cons list. You know what I'm saying? That sounds like a criminal right now, but you know what I mean. Like, think about what your story is. What is the story that you want to tell your CNA and your nurse at the end of your life? What's your story? Think about it for a couple minutes. Think about it tonight, and then start working towards those stories. Don't just stop there and be like, well, I wrote down my story, Bri, and you know what? This is what I really want. Well, that's great, but then keep going. Go with that momentum. Feel how it makes you feel all excited and crazy, and you're like, yes. When I help people manifest things, when I see them making their life better, when I hear somebody or somebody comments on one of my videos and says, you have no idea how much this has helped, or somebody has messaged me and said, your blog post helped me so much, or your post today, it was amazing, you know, or your video helped me have the confidence to start doing my own thing. That right there gets me excited, because I know I'm heading towards my purpose, because I know I'm starting to live in my own power, because I know I'm starting to write my story, but I'm already also starting to live my own story. You see what I'm doing there? I'm moving on with the momentum. So I started writing my story. Now I'm living the story. So go ahead, write your fairy tale, write your story, and then go live it. Start working towards it. Once you write down your story, now write down a list of how it is that you're going to get to live that story. What do you need to do first? Write down what you need to do first, and then work from there. If you're like scared right now and you're going, I don't know if I can do this, Bri, well, that's okay. Start with the smallest step, writing your story. Then from there, start from the first step of how you're going to start to live your story. Mine was starting to look for places in South Carolina to live and starting to look for jobs. Whatever it took to get me to South Carolina. And then I had to go look at U-Haul trailers. And I realized that I needed to sell all of my furniture because it wasn't all gonna make it down here. To get all of my furniture down here to South Carolina would have cost me over $2,000 and some dollars. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, seriously? It's cheaper to drive my car, pulling a U-Haul trailer, and staying in hotels every single night, which I would have had to do anyways, drive my car and stay in a hotel every single night until I got here. So I thought, no. I'm not gonna spend $2,000 and some dollars on a U-Haul trailer when in fact furniture is just stuff. And you wanna know what? We can always sell it, we can always get rid of it. It's the memories that I wanted. I wanted the memory of moving. And guess what? I have an amazing memory with my uncle, because somehow I talked him into coming with me all the way from, well, he flew into Denver, Colorado, but all the way from Colorado to South Carolina, and we had an adventure. And if you haven't watched my moving vlog, I will put a link of it down below, because I highly recommend watching it, because we did get lost sometimes. But to me, all of those missteps was just another memory we were making. It was just another step in my story, another direction that I needed to take. And you wanna know what I realized as I look back? Every single time we got lost or something happened, it was because I wasn't taking a breath and I wasn't living my story. I was choosing to be scared, and I was freaking myself out because I was also trying to buy a house at the same time. And instead of sitting there and thinking, this is the moment, I'm moving, and enjoying the time with my uncle, I was freaking out and talking to lenders. So every time we got lost, I had to take a moment and laugh with my uncle and just enjoy the moment. And I realize now that, you know what? That's why those mishaps happened. And I'm glad for them, because I got that extra time with my uncle. I got those memories with him. but I was also living my story. I was writing my story at the same time. Was it easy? No. Are the days getting easier? Sometimes not so much, but you want to know what? They're pretty freaking amazing, and I still have a lot of adventure left ahead of me. I still have a lot of story to write, and I'm super excited about it, and I'm super excited to see where it goes next. So, what's your story? Tonight, I want you to think about that. What's your story? Start writing down, what's your story? What is it? Let me know in the comments below, because I love hearing other people's stories. What's your story? Write it down today and start living it today, because it's your life and your purpose here on earth is your story. What's your story? All right, guys. With that said, I hope you love your story, and at the end of the day and at the end of your life, I hope that when it comes to that point where you're talking to your CNAs and your aides, that you are telling them the story that you want and not the story that everybody else wrote for you. And with that said, I love you guys. Bye.